Welcome to LiveDaf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome back to today's Daf Hayomi. Maseches CHULLIN Daf Ches. We begin right on top. Amar Rab Zera, Amar Shmuel. As we know, shchita is performed by using a sharp blade, a sharp knife, which cuts through the simanim, the windpipe and the food pipe, right? Esophagus and the trachea. You can't burn them. You can't just destroy them. That would render the animal a terefa if you just injure the simanim. It has to be cut. Now, let's say you have a knife which was heated to the point that it's like a libun, right? You take it and you make it red hot. A very, very hot knife. Use that. You take that and use it for shchita. Interesting question. Shall we say that the simanim have been cut by way of the sharp blade, or shall we say that the heat, the immense heat of that knife, burnt through the simanim and injured them, rendering the animal a treifa, which is now forbidden? Was it an act of shchita or not? Amar Rab Zera, Amar Shmuel, libain, sakin. He took a knife. He did libun. Right, made it red hot. V'shachat ba, and performed shechita with that knife. Shechita sek sheira, it's acceptable shechita. Why? Chiduda. The sharpness of the blade, the impact coming from the sharpness, the cutting effect of the knife precedes the heat effect, the burning effect. It takes a while for the heat to transfer. And by the time that happens, the cut has already occurred. Chiduda, its sharpness effect, koydem precedes. Libuna precedes its heat effect, its heat transfer. Okay, says the, well, that's good regarding the point of impact, where the blade impacts and cuts, the tip of the blade. But what about the sides of the blade, right, which are now touching the sides of the simanim? So before the knife had a real chance to cut through, shchita only happens when roiv, the majority, you get to the point of 50+% of that siman. Then you have shchita, but until that point, while it's still 20, 30%, 40% cut, the shchita is still midway, right? At that point, if the sides, the walls of the knife had come into contact with the walls, so to speak, the sides of the simanim, and burnt them and injured them and harmed them, that makes it a treifa. Well, you could stadin. The answer is it never touches that stadin. Beis hashchita mirvach ravach, because the cut area widens as the knife comes through it. The simanim just widen and shy away from the knife, so it never comes into contact with the walls of the hot walls of the knife. Now comes a new question, which will somewhat relate to our discussion. Totally different topic of negoim. So as we know, we look in the psukim, we find something called shchin and michvah. So if a white blotch, a white stain, a nega, appears on an area which had been burnt, a person had a burn, when there was a nega on that. So there are two categories. One is called shchin. It's sitting on top of a boil, some sort of mark that was generated by way of a strike, by way of heat, that was generated by way of an impact, like getting a bang, right? It's not a fire sourced, it's just plain heat. Then we have heat sourced, fire sourced. That's michvah. Person got a burn. And that area is called a michvah, a burn, on which if a negar appears, he becomes tummy. Now you can't mix them up. You can't combine a shchin and a michvah. Shchin is being struck and being heated up by way of non-fire, and michvah is by way of fire. So now comes an interesting question. The Bnei Yeshiva wanted to know, let's say libain shafud, he takes a shafud, which is a rod, heats it up very intensely, v'hikabain, strikes his good old friend. What's the status of that mark, of that injury? Because we have two elements at play. We have the power of the impact, the effect of the strike itself, that heat that causes injury, and we have the fire effect, right? The actual heat that was transferred, the burn effect, due to the burning, rod. So how would we define the injury? Mishum shechin nidain? Is it considered like shechin on account of the actual strike impact? Mishum michva nidain, or do we view it as a burn? Now, what's the difference? Because the Sanya, as per the Brisa, shechin and michva. So these two types of negoim, mitamen b'shavua echad, mitamen their tuma procedure, their tuma process extends for a week only, as opposed to other negoim which have 2 or 3 weeks. This is limited to a week. Bishnei simanin, there are 2 signs of tuma. B'seir lovin, if they grow white hair, b'fisin, or they actually expand and grow. Now, the obvious question is, if they both have the same system, why split them into 2 different types of negoim? To teach us, you can't combine them. So, only if a full-size nega, which is a shear of a gris, the size of a bean, appears on the shchin, will he be tummy, or on the michvah will he be tummy? You can't combine. Suppose you have a shchin and michvah side by side, and you have the half nega on this side, straddling, right? Half on this side, half. It's not going to be tummy. Shem is darfin zems. Okay, Vitanya, we have a brisa, or a mishnah, Tanan. How do we define shchin? How do we define michvah? Ezo shchin, ezo michvah. The answer is shchin is a mark resulting from a non-fire sourced heat strike, right? By being hit, by being slapped. Whereas michvah is fire related. Ezo shchin, ezo michvah. Laka ba'etz, he was struck by a piece of wood, ba'evan, stone, ba'gefas, with hot olive skins. After they press them, they're really hot. That's not fire related. The hot springs of Tveria, which are very hot but not heated by way of fire. Or anything that doesn't wasn't fire generated. To include Aver Meikare, that's lead which was quarried from its source, where it's very hot. All these are examples of Zeushchen. What's considered michvah? Fire-related injuries. Nikva b'gachelas, he got burnt with a coal, berebetz with hot ashes, b'sidr sech, cooking lime, b'gavsis resech, cooking plaster. Likewise, any fire-related heat, lasui cham ya'or, water boiled on fire, over fire. Zui michvah, these are michvah. B'tanya. Furthermore, we have a brisa. We're sort of building up our equation here. Shchin and michvah. Suppose a person experienced a shchin and a michvah in the same exact spot. How do we deal with it? How do we classify it? The answer is, whatever came last, that determines its status. If shchin arrived before the michvah, bitel michvah shchin. So now michvah that came last, that burn undoes the shchin effect. And vice versa as well. If michvah preceded the shchin, bitel shchin is a michvah, shchin took over the michvah. Okay, so back to our story with the rod that was used to strike his friend. The fellow had a little shchin area which featured a half-sized nega, half a gris. Gris is like a bean, right? I think it's 36 hairs, place where 36 hair can grow. So that's the shear, that's the minimum size for a nega. So he had half on the shchin. His good friend comes along. He takes his rod, the shvud, and fires it up and strikes his friend right next to the shchid. And on that injury, on that mark, suddenly appears another half a gris of a nega, right next to the neighboring half a gris. What is his status? So, the first part was certainly a shchin. This new injury, how do we define it? There's an element of shchin in there because it was produced by a strike, because it was hit by the rod, but there's michvah as well because it was fire heat transferred. So the question is, which one comes first? Shall we say the effect of the actual strike gets his foot in the door first, he's there first. V'asi hevlan, and the heat effect comes umavatale and undoes that. So now umavatale chavot and undoes the effect and status of the chavat of the strike. And therefore, it's like the case of the shchin, which was followed by umichva v'lei mistarfen, and now it's defined as a michva. It's labeled as michva and cannot connect. It can't be combined with the other half, which was shchin, because shchin and michva can't combine. Or shall we say, that's the other way around. Havla kadam. First, the heat effect takes place. The strike effect comes along, undoes the hevel effect. So now, since the final step was shchin, it's considered shchin, and it now can connect to its neighboring shchin as well. So which way? Tashma, which we can try to prove it from the halacha that we had on the top of the page. Regarding shchita, leaving sakin shachat, but he took this red hot knife and used it for shchita. It's okay. Shtasik share. Why? Because the cutting effect of the blade precedes the heat transfer. Chiduda, koydem libuna. No, so what do we see? Al machavata kadem. Apparently, the strike effect goes first. So same thing with the rod. The strike effect is felt first, and then comes the heat. No, chidud shani, it's very different, because by the knife, we're talking about a very, very thin surface area, the tip of the blade, which is causing the cutting effect, which has very little heat there. So certainly over there you say the cut precedes the heat transfer, but over here it's a flat surface, it's a rod or a round surface. Perhaps it doesn't work that way. Perhaps the heat gets transferred quicker. Tashma, comes another raya from Reb Brisa, which discusses our very case. Liben shvud v'ikaboy. Okay, he took the shvud, the rod, heated it, struck with it. Nidan b'shemichvas. That injury is called michva. No, so what do we see? Alma, apparently chavata kadon. Physical strike effect comes first, and then comes the heat transfer, which obliterates the shchin effect, and it relabels it as a michva. It's exactly our discussion. No, asamnami, perhaps there as well. The mivra as a bar mivras. What happened was, he didn't strike him on the flat surface. You see, the rod had a pointy edge, a pointy surface, and he struck him with the point first. So it's like the case of the knife, because the point has a very small surface area. And there, certainly you can say that the bang, the strike effect, the impact of the actual strike goes first, and then comes the heat transfer. But if it's a flat surface, a wider surface, like a flat rod, there perhaps it's different, so we're not sure which way to go. Okay, so in summation, red hot knife used for shchita is okay because the chidu, the cutting effect, precedes the heat transfer, and there's no treifa issues. Regarding the rod that was red hot used to strike and create this shchin and michva combination, which way do we look at it? We're not sure. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba Rav. Another halacha regarding a knife. Saken shlavez kecham. You have a knife which belongs to Avodah Zarah. It's meant for idol worship. You don't worship the knife itself, but it's meant to serve Avodah Zarah. You're not allowed to have any positive benefit from it. Any hana. Mutar lishchat, but you can do shchita with it. Whoa, why? We'll see in a minute. But you can't use it to cut basar, to cut meat. So shchita, yeah, but just cutting in the kitchen, no. Why? Mutar lishchat, but you can use it for shchita makakul, because technically he's destroying. He's diminishing the value of the animal. Rashi explains the animal during its lifetime is available for 3 functions: generate offspring, farming, and for consumption. And now when he's shechting it, he's now downgrading it to just its meat value. So technically he hasn't really had any net benefit from the knife itself, which just actually caused him harm. But v'aso lachtach by basar, you can use it to chop away meat, lachtach by basar, misakano, because there he's actually benefiting. Rashi says, once the shechita was done, okay, now it's meat, irrespective of its former status. So meat, it's got to be cut up. That's called having ano. Amar Rava, right? So Amar Rava. There's an exception to this rule. Sometimes shechita would be asr. When it's an unhealthy animal. The animal is sick and about to die. So now, shechting it actually salvages the value of the animal. So you can't use the sakin for that. Conversely, umechatech mutter. At times, cutting meat with this knife is okay. Ba'atmi, where it's, nice cuts of meat, prestigious cuts of meat, the kaiman lekurbana, which I meant, suitable for use as a gift to present to a prominent person. And now you're going to cut it up into pieces, you can chop it up into, it ruins its status. So in this case, actually, it's the opposite of hana. Ask the Gemara, okay, we're talking about, having hana, and whether it's hana. Aside from that, isn't there a more basic issue? The kashrus of the knife should be an issue. What about the shamnunis, the fattiness of Isra, the forbidden residue, sitting on this knife that was avodah zarah knife, it was used for non-kosher. Says the Gemara, we turn to Talmud base. B'chadasha. It's a brand new knife. It was never really used to cut forbidden materials. Well, if that's the case, then what's the issue? You can have anah from it as well. It was never used to serve avodah zarah, even though it was designated for that purpose. But until it's actually pressed into service, it's not asur. B'chadasha, bein Rabbi Shmuel, bein Rabbi Kiva, according to all shittas, mishamshi avodas kechavim hein. We're talking about something which was meant to be used for avodah zarah purposes, to serve avodah zarah. Mishamshi avodas kechavim, and these items einan asur not ya'avdu, don't become asur until they're actually used, as opposed to new. So one answer could be the pasuk about gavs lavitz kechavim. It was used in a different context. It used to cut. The pasuk used it to cut gavs, a piece of wood, for the avodah zarah. So it was used, in which case it's now considered mishamshi avodas kechavim, which are forbidden for further use and further hana by Yisrael. At the same time, it has no fatty residue on it. It wasn't used for meat at all. Another way to answer this, Bishana was speaking about an old knife which had been used for avodah zarah. Shaliv Nabor, which went through leave when it was burnt out. It was koshered. So the only remaining issue is having a hana from a avodah zarah knife. Itmar comes a new question regarding another knife. Now he took a knife that belonged to goyim, that was used for non-kosher materials, and he did the shechita with it on a kosher animal. What happens? Now we assume there was shamnunis, right? There was this forbidden fattiness on the knife itself, and the question is, how deeply embedded is that material in the new animal? How far do you have to go to extract it and to remove that material? Rav Amar Koilaf, he has to peel off a layer which is deemed to have absorbed this illicit material. Rav Bar Chana Amar, no, madiach, just give it a rinse. A surface rinse. Why? What's the machlokes about? So, we know that when there's no heat involved, then there's no absorption. A rinse is enough. When there's heat involved, then we assume there's absorption. So the question is whether the beis hashchita, the place where you cut, how hot is it? Is it considered soinen, cool, or is it considered overheated and absorbent? Lema, perhaps the machlokes revolves around this question. One shita says, well, it's beis hashchita, the place where you shecht is cool and it doesn't have the absorption concerns, so rinsing is enough. Umar Sava, the opposing shita, says beis hashchita riseach. No, it's cooked, it's heating, it's really hot out there, in there. The kuliyam all perhaps hold beis hashchita riseach, and in fact, the beis hashchita gets really heated up. No, mandamar koilov, the one that says you have to peel that layer, shopper, that's explained very well because of absorption concerns. Umandamar madiach, the one that says just give it a rinse. Why? What happened to the absorption concern? I did the Tiridin Simonin. Oh, here there's a special element called Tiridi Simonin. The Simonin are preoccupied with exuding, expelling their blood. That's what they're doing, right? The Tiridi Simonin, they're preoccupied. Lafukidam, to expel the blood, they're not going to absorb. There's a one-way street coming out. So the traffic coming out doesn't allow any absorption. There's another way to explain this machlek. The kuliyama all agree, beis hashchita tzoyne. The area is not considered overheated. No, manda omar madiach shapa, that explains why you can rinse it. Manda the other sheet that says koilaf, you have to peel it off. Here it's different. Agav doicha de sakina bala. Although there's no heat element to speak of, but the duchik, the sakina, the pressing down, the pressure created by that knife during the shechita, that pushes it in and facilitates an absorption of this material into the skin, into the meat, and has to be peeled away. What about second treifa, a new type of situation? He has a knife that had been used to shecht a kosher animal, which was then discovered to be an injured animal, treifa, which is not kosher. No, how do you clean the knife for further use? Pligi bar Rav Achar Ravina, another machlekes. Chadamar b'chamin, chadamar b'tzayin. One says just rinse it off with tzayin, with cold. The other one says no, you have to use hot. You have to. Rashi says it means hagala, the accepted, hagala procedure of extraction through boiling hot water. What's the machlekes about? So the one that says chamen, that's because it absorbed by way of the beis hashchita, which was heated. The one that says tzayin, Rashi says, the beis hashchita is just does not achieve that degree of heat, which facilitates a bliya. And what's the halacha? The conclusion is you can use even cold water. Interestingly, Rashi says, well, here we're concluding that it's okay. We're more lenient than in the piece just a minute ago. The Gemara didn't really conclude one way or the other. So he says, even though it appears that it's based on the same factors, right? So he says, because they were talking about a knife. A knife is a hard surface, kosher levloya, more difficult to absorb into a knife than to a piece of meat. So here we assume it's okay, you could just give a rinse. Whereas in the previous Gemara we're talking about the reverse question, that the improper material may have gotten absorbed into the skin, into the flesh of the animal, which is more absorbent, of course. There, it's a different story. Okay, so here we pass. Now, you don't have to necessarily rinse it with water, you can just give it a nice scrub and you're good enough. Belisa, the paras, if you can find a patch, a little piece of hard material, an old beged, which can be used to scrub off this residue. L'michparei, to wipe off this, scrub off and clean up the knife. Then that's good enough. Like so, you don't need to rinse it any further. Ulmando amar bechamen. Now, according to the shita that held that you have to actually use hagola, hot water, to extract the absorbed residue, my timer. What's the issue? Mishum de kabbalah yisura. Right? The issue is because the knife was boilei, absorbed, from the treifa that it was used to, that it shechted, right? Well, if that's an issue, then you can't use any knife. The hetera nami. So let's say you took a regular knife, shechted a regular animal. Now let's realize an animal during its lifetime is forbidden for consumption. Why? A living being, Ever min achai. So while he's doing the shechita, let's assume it's very hot in there, right? So there's non-kosher material of this Ever min achai going into the knife until the shechita actually concludes. During the act of shechita, there's Ever min achai material. So it's a concern with every knife. Every knife should need hagala after you do any shechita. Says the Gemara, no, listen to this. Emas bala. When does the knife absorb? L'chichayma. When the area rises to a very high degree of heat, right? When it achieves a high temperature. When does that happen? Emas kochayim l'chigamar shechita. When the shechita concludes. That's just by laws of nature, that's what happens. That's when it heats up. Well, at that point, it's already shecht, right? At laws, it's Eber min achai status, which eliminates any concern of isser absorption. L'chigamar shechita, hayishaita. At that point, heterav, it's already heter. So there's no concern with every knife. It's just over here when we know that he shechted a treifa animal, which was forbidden all along. Right, from beginning to end. And at that last point, when the heat reaches a high enough point, which facilitates absorption, and the animal's a treifa, you have a problem with the knife. Okay, so conclusion regarding knives. A heated knife is okay because chidud kadim libuna. Sakash avedazara, typically can be used for shchita, but not for chatichas basar, barring some exceptional cases. A sakin which was used for non-kosher materials, and now you want to use it for the shchita. If it was used for shchita, some say rinsing of the flesh is enough. Some say klifa, and depends on the question of beis hashchita, whether there's heat involved in the beis hashchita. Another pshat is whether the pressure of the knife is mavliya. And regarding a sakin used for a treifa, machlekes whether you in hagala or just rinsing or cleaning, and that's the maskana. Okay, one more halacha regarding knives. Amar vida amar Rav, hatabach, every butcher, every sheichet, tzarech shleisha sakinen. Seems like the butcher of the old days, he was also the sheichet. He was a sheichet, and he would actually cut up the meat, and right. So he needs a set of 3 knives, each one with a different purpose. Hatabach tzarech shleisha sakinen, 3 knives. Achas sheichet, but one for shchita. One is for cutting of the cuts of meat. And the third one to cut the forbidden fats. You can't mix up the knives. Ask the Gemara, I understand why you need a separate one for the shchita to keep it, sharp and smooth. You don't want to dull it, you don't want to chip it. But why a separate knife for the basar and the chaylev? All he needs is really one knife for the basar and the chaylev. And he should do it in order. First, let him cut the permissible material of the meat. And when he's done that, go over to the chaylev, and then cut the chalav, and then rinse it off and start again. Why 2 separate knives? There's a concern that he might mix it up. He might do the fat and then move over to the meat. And the knife will have transferred some of the chaylev material into the meat. Well, Ashtanami now, so here too, if you have 2 knives, you might mix them up. You might mix them up and use the wrong one. Since we required him to have 2, then he's mindful, then he's pretty clear about it. It's pretty obvious that he has to keep it separate, and he'll remember. Talking about keeping things kosher and separate, he needs to have 2 bowls, shalmayim, filled with water, for rinsing purposes. One to rinse the permissible meat, the other one to rinse the fat. Again, same question, just have 1 bowl and do it in order. First rinse the meat, then the fat. He might mix it up. He might do the fat and then the basar. Well, here is all, he might mix them up and do the wrong one and the wrong thing. Maybe I get mixed up. The answer is, since he has to have 2, it makes it obvious and clear. And since we required him to have 2 bowls, it's clear, and it will avoid confusion. Amar Meimar, talking about keeping things kosher, Mishmei Rav Papa, he names Rav Papa, Kafli is the side of the ksalim, the flanks of the animal, which has a bed of meat on which there is some forbidden fat perched, right? So it's meat with a glob of fat perched on it. That's the way it grows. That's the way, A person should not layer, should not place this kafli, this side of the animal, on top of another piece of meat, because the fat is now going to be overturned and lying on that new piece of meat. The the forbidden fat will now trickle, will not dissolve and run into the new meat. The balabisra will be absorbed into the new meat. And make it also, if that's the case, kitritzinam, even just sitting in its place, lined up properly, the fat, why is it no concern that the fat will just run into its own surrounding flesh, will be absorbed into its surrounding flesh? It's sitting on basar, right? The answer is there's a membrane, a waterproof membrane in between karma. There's a membrane mafsik b'tatoy that's separating the fat from the meat below. If that's the case, meloi, switch to tesamad alf, meloi nami. Well, on the top side as well. Meaning, what's wrong with putting it over another piece of meat? The fat is covered on all sides. It's encased on bottom and on top with a membrane. There's a membrane sitting on top of the fat as well. It's totally encased. It's already been tampered with and disturbed. Because the tabach, the butcher, the fellow is tampering and moving things. It mifses, it gets disturbed and gets broken up, and the top layer is no longer intact, in which case, be careful not to have it come into contact with other meat, lest there be a transfer, which is problematic. Okay, that's it for today. All the best to you, and Atzlacha Rabbah.